everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome to my guide to Lily Gold Why Choose Romance Books. So I was talking to a few people in one of Izzy's members live streams, and I was saying that I was reading through Lily Gold's books, and I started getting some questions about the series, and I said I would sort of talk about it in more depth. So that's how this video has come about, because I have read all 4 of her Why Choose romances. As far as I could tell, that was all that she had available, and I initially picked these up because of Book Talk, which to be honest was quite a scary thing for me to do. However, I had heard some good things, particularly about Faking with Benefits, and I found them really cheap, so I picked up the physical copies. So as I said, these are all Why Choose romances. There is no sword crossing in these, so they're polyamorous relationships between 3 men and a woman, and the men usually have a very close friendship, but nothing more than that. Straight away, I'm going to put out there, this is not my preferred Why Choose polyamorous relationship type at all. I prefer everyone to be involved with everyone else. However, I have to say it didn't bother me quite so much in here because the men did have this really close relationship in other aspects of their life, and there was very little conflict between any of them at any point. I was surprised that I enjoyed it as much as I did, but I have to say I was never going to rate these as highly as I do other Why Choose romances, just because they are purely focused on the female character. But all that said, what I found was that these were very well written, very compelling, especially given the size of some of these books. I mean, some of them are quite large. And the other thing that really surprised me was the way that they dealt with some very contemporary issues and conversations that needed to be had in a way that made me want to keep reading about them. I'm going to talk about them in the order that I read them, and then I'm going to give you my ranking of which books I enjoyed the most. And Izzy also asked me what stood out about the books for me and what made them fun reads. Okay, so the very first book that I read was Faking with Benefits. This one happens to also be the largest book in the series, and it's about Layla Thompson, who runs her own online lingerie store, but finds herself undateable, or considers herself undateable. Whenever she goes on dates, they just don't go well, and she ends up confiding in her 3 neighbors who happen to be friends of hers that she is finding it really frustrating. They happen to run a dating podcast, and so she goes to them for help. She wants them to help her become a better date, and they propose a scenario. They will help her become a better date by going on some fake dates with her. That's where the fake dating element comes in. And she will help them with a series on their podcast around how her feelings change about herself being a successful date on their podcast. So everyone's getting something out of this. Of course, once they get involved, you know, they start feeling feelings for one another, and the relationship element goes from there. I love a good fake dating book, so that was what made me pick this one up first. It's also friends to lovers, which is always nice. I mean, it's not always my favorite thing to pick up, but I do enjoy it if it's done well, and I feel like this one progressed relatively naturally. All of the characters were really fantastic. One thing that I hadn't realized, and I just had to take a while to process, was the fact that there is an age gap between her and one of the men who happens to be one of her old professors, and I just had to move that student teacher hat off because that is a big no-no for me. But they're all consenting adults in here, so that's fine. The issue that was dealt with primarily in here is that Layla in high school had been really severely bullied. It comes back up in the story. She happens to have a high school reunion. One of the guys goes with her, and she has to come face to face to the people who made her life hell. So there is that element in here. It also explores anxiety and overwhelm in situations like this. As I said, it was a surprisingly compelling read for something as large as this, because when contemporary romances get this big, I start to get nervous. So I read that one ages ago, and then this past week I have read the other 3 Lily Gold books. So I read 3 Swedish Mountain Men, which I have a feeling might be her first book. This one is also the shortest one, and this one is about Daisy, who is in Sweden trying to get away from her life because her ex-boyfriend, in retaliation for the fact that she broke up with him and won't get back together with him, released a sex tape that he made unbeknownst to her. And so her whole life has imploded. She was a teacher, but she's been fired because of this video. Her family are no longer speaking to her, and she just wants to get away. She wants to go somewhere where no one knows her. She ends up in this town. She's out driving on the roads, and there happens to be a moose on the road, which freaks her out, and she ends up crashing her car. And these 2 guys come along. They notice the car accident. They check to see if she's okay, but there's a storm coming in, and they don't have time to get back to the town, and so they offer for her to come and stay at their place, one of them more reluctantly than the other. And when she gets there, she meets their 3rd friend, and all 3 of these guys live together on sort of on the top of this mountain in a very remote space because they want to be closer to the local communities rather than the touristy town where Daisy was going to be staying. In this one, you have a doctor, you have a ski instructor, and you have a ranger. And Cole the ranger is the one who is, you know, less than thrilled about having a house guest. And actually what I forgot to mention in Faking with Benefits, and is the same in this one, is that all three of the men have been involved in a polyamorous relationship with another woman before. That ended not fantastically. So that's a similarity between the two books. Daisy is kind of being a bit shifty around them. She's not really telling them her identity and why she's out here, and so that puts Cole more on edge. But the other two quite like her and they think she's fun, and eventually they do end up exploring their relationship with one another. However, because she's keeping secrets, this does come back to bite them a little bit later on, because their previous partner was also keeping secrets and caused a lot of conflict between the three men, and so that sort of implodes right in the middle of a snowstorm. Daisy gets trapped in the snowstorm, someone has to go and save her, etc. Very dramatic. This one was okay. Again, not my favorite in the series, but an interesting place to see where she went from this to Faking with Benefits. Next, I read Triple Duty Bodyguards. This is a romantic suspense celebrity and bodyguard why choose romance. All three of the men in this are former SAS turned bodyguards. They also previously worked together in the SAS, and one of the characters, the leader of the group, is dealing with some quite significant PTSD in this book, so be aware of that going into it, because that is one of the major discussion points. And the other two were severely injured and scarred when all of them were taken by the enemy, and that's what's driving the PTSD. We kick off with our celebrity heroine. Her name is Briar, and she has been an actress since she was a very young teen. And what we quickly realize is she has been taken advantage of her entire life. People just see her as a commodity, as a brand, and her way of dealing with that is to become the biggest diva and cause the biggest scenes that she possibly can, because it's armor. While I'll talk about the relationships between the characters in a minute, I think that was the most compelling thing about this story for me, was the fact that there was this huge focus on celebrity and on the fact that people think celebrities owe other people things. She has a stalker. The stalker has gotten into her home in the middle of the night, and that's what prompts her need to have these three bodyguards. Except she hates having people there. She just wants her space. She's just frustrated that this guy initially got into her place, and now she's being shadowed by people everywhere she goes. She doesn't blunt her tongue around them, which sets Matt, who is the leader of the group, on edge, because he hates working with celebrities for that reason. He thinks she is entitled. He thinks the absolute worst of her, because that's all he sees. Interestingly enough, another member of the team, Kenta, has a psychology degree and realizes quite quickly that she's not the person she shows to the media and the paparazzi, and he recognizes it as a shield. And I loved him. He was an absolute cinnamon roll of a character. Like, he was injured overseas, but he has a really calm, rational viewpoint, which I really appreciated in these books. And then you have Glenn, who is Scottish and has facial scarring from being taken and is really self-conscious about that. So all of them are dealing with their own things, and like, Kenta has a special place in my heart just because he was just so calm and rational, and you don't often get those really calm, rational, controlled characters. Also, he likes a woman to lead in the bedroom, which was just really fun. But I also like Briar, and I think she's a character that a lot of people would call unlikable because she is so forthright. But what I found really fascinating in this is, because she has this air of, I just don't care, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. She actually uses it to call out people doing absolutely shitty things in the celebrity world, because people expect her to say it. And so she does. And I thought that was a really cool way to play around with a character like that, which we don't often see. So I hope people don't find her unlikable, because a lot of what she does is to protect herself, but she also has found a way to help other people by doing that. And it takes a little while, particularly for Matt, to see that she is not what she's projecting to other people, and I appreciated that. But yes, the romantic suspense element comes in with the stalker, because they end up traveling overseas to the US for the launch of her newest film. There is some kidnapping, there is quite a bit of action and threat to people's lives as a result of that, so be aware of that. But I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was a really fun time. That could be because I'm currently in my romantic suspense phase, but here we are. And the final book that I read was Nanny for the Neighbours by Lily Gold, which I did not expect to like as much as I did, because it has the surprise baby, and there is a baby the whole way through the book. So you have Jack, Cyrus and Sebastian, who are all friends. They're living together in an apartment, and you have Beth, who lives on the apartment below them. Beth has always seen Jack around the apartment, and they both have this mutual attraction to one another, but have not done anything about it. So when Jack comes to her door one morning and just says, "We need your help, come and help," because a baby has been left on their doorstep. and the baby belongs to one of them, but they don't know who it belongs to because the mother is a woman that they were all involved with. And so Beth comes and checks on the baby and is, you know, initially quite taken aback by the situation, and they have to explain it to her because she can't comprehend how they don't know whose baby it is. But once they get past that, she's just taken in by Cammy, who is the baby, who is just utterly adorable. I actually really loved having the baby in this book. It worked really well. We find out Beth has been a nanny for a long time. She herself went through the foster care system, so she's quite sympathetic to a baby who has been abandoned by its mother and left with 3 guys who are absolutely clueless with how to look after it. So she starts teaching them how to care for a 6-month-old baby. I liked all of the characters in here. Beth goes through some huge ups and downs in this book. One, there's a lot of discussions around her time in foster care and the fact that she was never adopted. In this book, she discovers her birth mother and has to decide whether or not to approach her birth mother and face possible rejection again. If anyone wants content warnings for that because it's a trigger, feel free to let me know or message me and I'll let you know what happens. She also finds out that she's going through premature menopause, which is not something I've seen in a book. And so there's discussions around infertility and the grief that comes with that because she was not expecting it. And she didn't have her own family's medical history because she was in the foster care system. Sebastian and Jack both work in IT. Jack designs video games. Sebastian sort of works as his manager. Cyrus, the third flatmate, is a male stripper and his scenes are fantastic. I actually really liked the way that his work life was portrayed in here and how Beth reacted to it in a really positive way. And we also have a character who is dealing with chronic migraines and a lot of trauma from being raised in a particular way where his parents basically treated him like he had anger management issues because he lashed out one time while under stress and dealing with some trauma of his own, and treated him as though he was a delinquent his entire life. And so that has totally shaped his belief, and it affects the way that he reacts around the baby and it affects the way he reacts around Beth. That was really heartbreaking to see a character like that because you know that happens. You know that there are parents out there who totally mess up their kids. So those are the basic outlines of all the 4 books. So what was my preference for them? Triple Duty, Bodyguard and Nanny for the Neighbours were probably my top 2 favorites. This one probably edges out just a fraction just because I'm in a romantic suspense mood and I really liked all of the conversations around celebrity. Then I would probably say Faking with Benefits and 3 Swedish Mountain Men as my last. So that would be my order of preference, but that is just due to my own reading preferences. In terms of what stood out, I think the fact that it dealt with some pretty heavy, hard-hitting topics in what, you know, should look like to be fairly rom-com-y style books, which they are. There's quite a bit of humor in these stories. I wasn't expecting to have all of those big topics discussed in quite as much depth as I got, which was a very pleasant surprise. There is a bit of a formula for all of the books in terms of the structuring of the story and the pace and how everything proceeds, but I found I didn't mind that so much. I actually think that worked in these books' favors because while the relationship beats hit sort of at the same point in the story, the characters were different and they were all dealing with their own separate issues, so that added the variety into the story. I like that each one played around with different tropes so that you could literally choose one of these and you'd probably find a romance trope that you enjoyed in at least one of them. And I think what made them fun reads, there was some really great banter between all of these characters. There were some really funny moments and they were just very readable. I think Lily Gold has a very easily digestible writing style so that even though they're quite large books, they were very easy to get through. That is my little review / guide to Lily Gold's Why Choose romances. No, they're not sword crossing books, but you know what? For what they were, I thought that they were really well done. I will leave links to all of them down below, so if you want to check them out, you can. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them down below. If you are planning on picking any of them up, I'd like to know which ones sound interesting to you. Otherwise, if you want to let me know that you're here but you don't leave a comment, feel free to leave your favorite flower emoji down below because all of these very beautiful illustrated covers feature different floral elements to them, so leave them down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.